Manté Vertelyté is the next speaker on our list, and Manté is going to end this part of the presentation list before the break. Manté is a postdoc at Aarhus University at the Department of Educational Science. Manté will speak about the exposure and erasure, the new and old diversity challenges. He will bring in the voice to the discussion of risk of exposing precarity and diversity challenges as a temporarily apparent phenomenon. And he will discuss politics of complaint as an affirmative take and critique of diversity and precarity in academia. And I want to welcome you very much, Manté, and I hope that you are ready for this speak here, as I cannot see you right now, but welcome to you, Manté.
Thank you, Mia. Can you hear me? Everything is fine?
Yes, and nice to hear you, Manté. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you for organizers really for, as you say, giving this space for my voice and for our voices. And thank you, Petra and Edwin, for your great presentations as well. And it was really great to hear them. And just to sort of also to say that it's really nice that finally these issues about junior precarity and diversity are coming to academia. I think we need that. And so I think I will tell a few words sort of semi-related to my own personal experience, but also will make some analytical, theoretical interventions, so sort of thinking of how we can think about these issues. And I'm speaking here from a perspective of being a female international scholar. That means I'm not native Danish, although I lived here for a couple of years. So my perspective from Petra is a bit different. And I'm also speaking from a perspective of a researcher that does research on diversity, racialization, and exclusion in educational contexts. So the first thing that I think about when you enter academia as a junior scholar, it also means that you sort of start learning about what it means to be what Pierre Bourdieu called once homo academicus, sort of a certain way of being academic, having certain habitus of being academic, also certain habits, but also ways of thinking and acting within academic structures. So for example, during my PhD, during my PhD period, I was learning about significance of collegial relationships for knowledge production, but also well-being in academia. But also I learned words such as sick leave or burnout that I actually haven't associated with academic work ever before. But during that sort of PhD time, sick leave and burnout become synonymous with academic work almost. But during my PhD postdoc years, I'm also learning right now the significance in big words such as funding, grants, BFE points, and learning how to calculate these points, but also competitive CV and words such as being lectorable, which is a Danish word, sort of speaking into sort of being fit and suitable for getting a lector position. But also hearing around my other, junior scholars talking about making it into the system. So these are sort of the words that you learn in the process. But at this point, you also learn that chances in arts and humanities to be lecturable as a female scholar is statistically significantly lower as if I were a male scholar. And this is where you also learn that a lot of your senior female colleagues, who I might thought that already made it into the system, actually work day and night just to be able to survive in that system. And so you realize these moments when you get emails from your female senior scholars at night, at 4 o'clock in the morning, and this is where you learn that, okay, this is what it takes to become this homo academicus. So my impression is that in many ways, being a female scholar and junior female scholar and senior female scholar is not that different. As a junior scholar, you want to make it. As a senior scholar, you want to survive. But I guess what is particular about being a junior scholar is that you're actually learning to accept, unfortunately, that precarity in academia is almost inevitable condition. And so I think that in many ways, the pandemic situation exposes junior scholar conditions, which has already been known. So it's not much new going on here. Junior scholar sort of precarity has always been marked by, working conditions that relies on terminated contracts, often underpaid for the amounts they spend on developing our competitive CVs, and also maybe sometimes under-acknowledged in our inputs. But I think that pandemic situation exposes many of the junior scholar precarity aspects also in different and new lights. I think it particularly exposes this fragility that we work on terminated contracts, either it's 2 years or 3 years. And also I think because of the difficulty of collecting data and conducting research, that sort of seriously challenges our possibilities, or even just to have a chance to make it. So it sort of becomes a certain chain of anxiety. So I think about, okay, so no data. So if I cannot get access to data, that means no data, no publications, that means no competitive CV, that means no fundings, no grants, and that means no permanent employment. So this is sort of a, I think it is a serious condition actually, because we are supposed to, in this limited time of period, we are supposed to build up our CVs that are competitive, but at the same time, requirements and demands for getting positions, permanent positions, are not decreasing at all. But also, when it comes to diversity, I could think of particular situations that struck me, particularly just made me think about how maybe sometimes international scholar perspectives are not being accounted into some of the regulations that comes that is related to pandemic regulations. So for example, I thought about this regulation that suggested that employees who choose to travel for holiday and for these reasons have to quarantine themselves and cannot attend meetings or teaching, sort of are being put on unpaid holiday, or the salaries are being reduced. And so sometimes I think, okay, but that's, being international scholar, we're not going for holiday abroad, we're going home and we're going to visit our families, which is our necessity. But also I have heard stories from my colleagues at different Danish universities, getting comments from other colleagues saying like, you're so lucky that you're teaching a class of students that are mainly Danish students, because if you were teaching international students, you would be more exposed to the chance to get infected. So I think it becomes almost a dangerous discourse that international scholar or a student in itself is assumed to be opposing a risk of threat to contamination. So in a way, it's becoming a contaminated figure in itself in times of pandemic, being a foreigner, being international. But I think the pandemic situation is exposing, a lot of precarities and exclusions, but it doesn't reveal a new phenomena as such. And I think that's important to remember. I think it's important that we talk about these issues not to make that these challenges of diversity in relation to junior scholar are temporarily challenged as only being specific to extreme times and being exposed to specific times. I think we should keep in mind that for some scholars, diversity challenges an everyday life experience, and not just an experience particular to extreme times. So by looking at these challenges as temporally or related to extreme situations, I think we're risking to erasing some of the experiences that has always been there, and some people have always been experiencing that. That leads me to the point also that when we talk about these issues, we also need to talk more about how the burden of pandemic is differentiated across intersections of nationality, ethnicity, race, gender, sexuality, ability, economic class, etc. So I think we also need to do more research, and we need more research knowledge based on how these categories intersect and how these categories particularly intersect in a Danish academic setting, because maybe these intersections are also quite different compared to different national nation-state educational institutions. But also, this is not to say that diversity initiatives are not taking place, and Danish universities are involved in preparing action plans and discussing how to implement diversity strategies when it comes to recruitment, but also talent retainment, etc. But I think we also really need to know also what happens when these initiatives happen. We need to know what happens when this kind of seminar is happening, what kind of resistances, what kind of acceptances it creates, as well as what kind of affects, moods, and atmospheres it creates, but also in turn of how this actually, these sort of affects challenge, but also maybe even sustain these academic patterns that we try to disentangle. So coming back to the point of sort of becoming Homo academicus is really not just a question of how to become this Homo academicus, but also how diversity strategies and initiatives challenge and or sustain the conditions of becoming one. And to finish, want to make a point that as much as we need research, I think we also need to complain. And we need to learn how to complain as an everyday sort of interventions into academic structures. So in relation to her work on complaining in academia, Sarah Ahmed writes that most often people sort of stay away or to, you know, don't proceed with complaining officially or unofficially, because many of complaints just disappear. Many of complaints are not regarded seriously, but also that people are afraid to complain because that means that some might be fear that that's your career suicidal, but also that it can become a source of shaming. But I think at the same time, if we don't want to risk of diversity challenges being erased, then pandemic is over. We need to find collective ways of how to institutionalize, but also perhaps capitalize ways of how to complain and forms of complaint that actually could be safe for everyone. And perhaps I think that maybe this seminar is a really good starting point for us to start seriously to complain. Thank you.